because otherwise you do not get to tell me your side of what happened, right? But I do have the authority to continue in the investigation no matter what. Yeah. Okay. So as far as Title IX, how that goes, it's basically I speak to both the parties involved. After that, I usually then, in those initial meetings, I ask for obviously what happened. I ask whether there are any witnesses to what happened. I also ask for any type of documentation, any type of pictures or videos. You know, it's very easy to take screenshots of text messages or phone records or anything like that. And then after I talk to the people involved, I talk to the witnesses. I don't have to interview all the people that either party identifies. I will interview people who I believe are relevant or closely connected to what happened. So if somebody's like, oh yeah, and I talked to, Susie, who's my Bible study friend, like I talked to her like 3 days after and I told her about what happened. I will not interview Susie. Unless I do not have enough corroborating evidence before, when I reach that point, I would probably not talk to her. I will talk to somebody who was physically present, or somebody who saw you pretty much, or saw the person right after it happened, basically in time. After talking to the witnesses, I make sure I collect whatever documentation either party gives me, or if I independently go out and get police reports or any other type of information independently, and then at that point I review everything. I type everything up in a report, which is basically broken down into how I got or how I was made aware of the situation, what the allegations are, then brief summaries of all the interviews that were taken, and then I list what I looked at as far as documentation and information, and then it lists whatever CSU policy or part of our policy applies to the incident, and then I make an analysis where I weigh basically what all has been given to, or basically what the record consists of at that point in time. I also make a credibility assessment. I say what my impression was of the complainant, but also of the respondent, and based on that credibility assessment, why I then come to a certain conclusion. And the conclusion is, not guilty and innocent. I'm not going to go out and vindicate, somebody's name. My job at that point is just to say whether or not, by a preponderance of the evidence, whether or not the respondent has committed a violation of CSU policy. That's it. Because people are sometimes confused about what it is that happens, when the investigation is complete. Is there like a verdict? It's not a verdict, right? It's administrative. It's not criminal. And really all it boils down to is whether or not there was a violation of CSU policy. My finding at that point is a recommended finding, meaning it's not final. Now, under our new procedure, at that point, depending on who or what status the respondent is, it will go to different department for a final finding and possibly sanctions. So let's say the respondent is a faculty member. My report and with my recommended finding will go to the provost, and they will take it from there. If the respondent is a non-faculty employee, it will go to HR. If the respondent is a student, then we have a new procedure where I would give my report to a reviewing panel. So we're doing away with a hearing panel at the first level. Because under Illinois law, and I think it's just good practice in overall, is to be trauma sensitive. So we wanted to reduce the amount of time a person has to retell their story, right? Because you're betraying that person gets upset all over again, and I don't want this, nobody would want to have to go through this, right? So the reviewing panel's job at that point is to review my report, look at everything that I looked at. They may then call me in, they may ask me questions. They may tell me, so witness so-and-so said this, and that. Can you follow up more and get more information about what they said about that particular part? Or go and, is this report somewhere? Can we find this report, or is there a report of this? So they will basically mostly interact with me. And then the idea is that they then come to a final finding, either agreeing with my recommended finding or saying, no, we don't believe that that was the case, right? Now, if either party wants to appeal that final finding, that would then go, the next level up. Again, if it's a student, it would go to the dean of students at that point in time for a hearing panel. What we also will make sure is that the parties not be in the same room, because that's not good either. And unfortunately, we had that practice here, which made me cringe. But yeah, there will be a hearing panel where each party will be in front of a hearing panel, one at a time. And they may have to answer the questions that the hearing panel may have. They are able to present their own witnesses, and then final decision is made there. As far as the students are concerned, they can be, or as far as potential sanctions, they looking at the same type of things that they would get for non-sexual misconduct things, right? So anything from a verbal warning all the way to expulsion, which we did have. And then, with faculty and with HR, with faculty, you guys would go through your usual process when it comes to looking at, conduct, and the same would be true for the HR track, basically. So that's basically what a Title IX complaint looks at. What is very much the hot thing right now in Title IX is with the leadership that we have right now in DC. There's a very there's a lot of emphasis on treating the parties equally, right? So not that we didn't do this already, but we have to make sure that we are able to show that all the investigations are fair and unbiased. I let all the parties know that they have a right to an advisor, which may include one day you. That they both have a right to interim measures, so be it having the other person be, relocated out of the dorms, changing out from a certain class because either the faculty member was the respondent or another classmate was a respondent, to any other no contact type set accommodations that we may have to make. The next slides are really just the process to file a report with the state. By law, you guys need to have that information, which you do have, contact information and online information as well. And yeah, so, and again, most of the things, or all of the things actually, that are in our policy are prohibited by Illinois law, and you look at the same type of things. So if it goes to HR, if it goes to the provost, you are looking at things like fines, of high amount, or being terminated.
Okay. Sorry, but my feet hurt a little bit, so I'm gonna sit down. Okay, so care and support. So we just want everyone to know that we have here on campus a wellness center where folks can go if they need immediate care. There's also Roseland Community Hospital as well as Trinity Hospital. As Carla mentioned earlier, folks can come to the counseling center for a confidential space to talk to, whether or not they are the complainant or the respondent. It doesn't matter. Both parties have the availability to get resources at the counseling center. This information just talks about our counseling hours and website, and then the resources that are available. In addition to the Wellness Center and the Counseling Center are the chaplain here on campus.
All right, my favorite part. So, I know you hear a lot of don'ts and, and all that kind of stuff, but really what we want is for you to be protected, right? We want your reputation to be protected as well as your classroom, right? That's what this is all about at the end of the day. So really one of the things that I would want us all to work on is setting boundaries. Your syllabus is your biggest shield for that. Your syllabus should be full of your expectations and the parameters of how you are to engage with your students and the students with you, right? So, boundaries are not a bad thing. Think of them as your protection. So that's where you should be saying, you know, don't call me after hours, basically. I would suggest that. I understand it's not always ideal, but you want to make sure that things are in place, because later on, if I have to ask you a question, well, why did you call the student at 9 p.m.? I mean, then we, and again, it might not sound realistic, but ask yourself what that would sound like in court. Because it's happening much, much more. I mean, the influx of lawsuits right now is ridiculous, okay? So you might snicker right now, but let this play out in your head and then see how you would be able to convince a jury that you had a legitimate reason to calling that student. And again, we're looking for patterns, right? Like if it's an emergency, systems are down, whatever, fine. But if you have a pattern of that, and you can't really justify it, then how does that look? So use your syllabus to put these boundaries in place. I'm not a fan of faculty giving out their cell phone numbers or asking for cell phone numbers of students. That just opens a whole other can of worms, and does not usually play out well in court. Again, I mean, and Dr. Bridges-Carter and I have talked about this before, but you really have to be mindful about the power dynamics between you and your students. I don't care, and yes, we have a lot of non-traditional students, so some of them are at same age as us, are older than us. But at the end of the day, you're still a faculty member, you're still a university representative. So whatever you say, do, comes with, like you said, with great power comes great responsibility. You have to be mindful of that, because those dynamics are the first thing an investigation or a lawsuit will look to. Again, check your, I know Dr. Bridges-Carter said she's a hugger, right? So I have that tendency too. I have a tendency to touch people on their shoulder when I talk to them, or their hand. Small things like that that really are, commonplace in most of our settings, with family, with friends, even colleagues. Minor things like that can turn into lawsuits. They can turn into investigations. So especially with people who don't know each other, right? It's one thing, I mean, we hang out outside of work, so it's fine, but especially in a setting where you have a new colleague or, somebody that you're not really social with outside of work, think twice about, that hand reach or the patting on the back or whatever it may be, just because you don't know how that other person may experience that, or that person may be re-triggered because of past trauma, or just not want to be touched. So check that. Choose your words wisely, from whatever's in your syllabus to your emails to students or to each other, because I see a lot of language where I'm just like, why, right? But also, like I said, your jokes, I mean, I know as a faculty member you want to build rapport, and you want your students to feel comfortable, enough to relate to you and have a certain atmosphere in class. But think about how you do that. Because again, how would that look to a third party that doesn't know you or your track record, how exemplary as it may be, but how would that look to the outside, right? Socializing outside of class. Again, yes, it's nice to build rapport with people. If there are field trips, there are other type of social settings where you will engage with your students. Again, if you feel like there's a student who, pays particular attention to you, time to remind them of the boundaries, right? You should just not be like, hey, she is game, No, you could do this. We don't have an anti-fraternization policy. But again, ask yourself, is this something that you want to have to explain later on, or can you explain it later on, right? Any questions? Yes. Oh, you're stretching.
I'm not sure if you're pointing at. Oh, okay. Are you pointing back here?
I'm pointing to you, yeah. Did you?
I'm just going to ask you a really quick question.
Yes.
I don't think you've addressed it. It might not be related to this. But what is our responsibility if a student is in class, in a face-to-face class, under the influence of some controlled substance?
I would call our campus police. I would have
I'm
them.
not suggesting they're disruptive in class necessarily, but one time I thought I sniffed something and I'm like, oh, great.
Oh, okay,
I
but
couldn't tell
so,
the
so was the
general
person,
reason for it.
but was the person like acting out?
Nope, nope.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say that, you know, you might